The desperate message. Captain Sarah Chen stared at the emergency transmission crackling through the bridge speakers. The alien voice was broken, filled with static and what sounded like explosions in the background. Please, anyone. The Krex Empire has broken through our defenses. Zeta Colony is falling. We have families here, children. They're slaughtering everyone. We need help now. The message cut to static. Sarah's bridge crew looked at her with mixed expressions. Some showed fear, others determination. The young communications officer, Tommy, looked like he might be sick. "Captain," said Commander Rodriguez, her second in command. "Zeta Colony is 3 days away at maximum speed. By the time we get there, they'll all be dead," Sarah finished. She knew he was right. The math was simple and cruel. 3 days was too long. But then something impossible happened. The ship's AI, Aria, spoke in her calm, electronic voice. "Captain Chen, I have detected an anomaly in space-time near our position. Unknown energy readings are off the charts." Through the main view screen, space itself began to twist and bend. Colors that had no names swirled in patterns that hurt to look at. The stars seemed to stretch like rubber bands. "What the hell is that?" Tommy whispered. Before Sarah could answer, a massive ship appeared out of nowhere. It was unlike anything they had ever seen. The hull was pure black, absorbing light instead of reflecting it. Strange blue energy pulsed along its surface like veins of lightning. "Captain," Aria announced, "I am receiving a transmission from the unknown vessel." "Put it through," Sarah ordered. Her heart pounding, a hologram appeared on the bridge. It showed a tall figure in a dark uniform, but the face was hidden in shadow. When the figure spoke, the voice was deep and commanding. "Greetings, Captain Chen. I am Admiral Marcus Kane of the Human Deep Space Fleet. We received your colony's distress call." Sarah's jaw dropped. "That's impossible. There is no human deep space fleet. And how did you get here so fast?" The shadowy figure seemed to smile. "There's a lot you don't know about humanity's true capabilities, Captain. We've been watching, waiting, preparing for threats like the Krex Empire." "Who are you people?" Rodriguez demanded. "We are what humanity becomes when we stop holding back," Kane replied. "Your colony ship was one of the first to leave Earth. You've been exploring, discovering, making friends with alien races. That's beautiful work, but some of us stayed behind to develop other skills." Through the view screen, more ships began to appear, dozens of them, then hundreds. Each one was larger and more advanced than anything Sarah had seen. They moved with purpose, forming perfect battle formations in seconds. "The Krex Empire thinks humans are weak because you explore with small fleets and avoid fights," Kane continued. "They're about to learn how wrong they are." Tommy's console started beeping frantically. "Captain, I'm reading massive energy signatures from all these ships. The weapons they're carrying. I can't even understand the readings." Kane's hologram turned to face the young officer. "You don't need to understand them, son. You just need to watch them work." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. "Admiral Kane, what exactly are you planning to do?" "We're going to save Zeta Colony, and we're going to send a message to the Krex Empire that they will never forget." The hologram flickered as explosions echoed in the background. The distress signal from Zeta Colony was still coming through, weaker now. "Hurry!" A voice screamed through the static. "They're in the city! The Krex are killing everyone! Children are crying for their mothers. Please, someone help us." Sarah's hands clenched into fists. She had joined the colonial fleet to protect human settlements, but her ship was just a medium-sized explorer with light weapons. What could she do against an entire Krex battle group? Kane seemed to read her thoughts. "Captain Chen, your exploration work is valuable. But today, you get to see what happens when humanity goes to war." The massive fleet began to move, but not toward Zeta Colony, which was 3 days away. Instead, they moved toward what looked like empty space. "Admiral," Sarah called out, "Zeta Colony is in the other direction." Kane's laugh was cold. "Who said we were flying there?" Space began to bend again. The stars stretched and twisted. Reality itself seemed to crack open like an egg. "What you're seeing," Kane explained, "is a quantum tunnel. It bends space and time. We can travel anywhere in the galaxy in minutes instead of days." Sarah watched in amazement as the tunnel opened wider. Through it, she could see another star system. She could see Zeta Colony burning. "Impossible," whispered Rodriguez. "That technology doesn't exist." "It does now," Kane said. "We've had 50 years to develop it while you were exploring. 50 years of preparing for the day when someone threatened human civilians." The fleet moved into the tunnel. Sarah's ship was pulled along by some kind of energy field. In seconds, they were traveling faster than anything she thought possible. Through the tunnel, she could see Zeta Colony getting closer. But she could also see something terrible. Dozens of Krex warships surrounded the human settlement. The colony's defense stations were destroyed. Fires burned across the surface. "How many colonists?" Kane asked. Sarah checked her files. 50,000. Men, women, children. Farmers, scientists, teachers. "And how many Krex ships?" Tommy was frantically working his scanner. "I count 47 heavy cruisers, 12 battleships, and... oh no, 3 dreadnoughts." Kane nodded. "Perfect. Just enough to make this interesting." Sarah stared at him in shock. The Krex fleet was massive. Each of their dreadnoughts could destroy a dozen human ships. This wasn't a rescue mission. It was suicide. But Kane didn't look worried. If anything, he looked eager. "Captain Chen, you're about to witness something that will change how the galaxy sees humanity forever. The Krex Empire has existed for 10,000 years. They've conquered hundreds of worlds. They think they're the strongest military force in the galaxy." The tunnel began to close as they approached Zeta Colony. The burning world grew larger on the screen. "Today," Kane continued, "they learned that they were wrong." Sarah watched the Krex fleet turn toward them. Warning lights flashed across her bridge as the enemy ships powered up their weapons. "Admiral," she said urgently, "they're targeting us." Kane's hologram smiled, and for the first time Sarah could see his face clearly. He was human, but his eyes held something cold and dangerous. "Let them try." The revelation: the Krex fleet opened fire first. Sarah watched in horror as hundreds of energy beams shot toward Kane's ships. Each blast was powerful enough to cut a moon in half. The Krex had wiped out entire civilizations with firepower like this. But something impossible happened. The human ships didn't dodge. They didn't raise shields. They just sat there as the deadly energy beams struck them, and nothing happened. The weapons hit the black hulls and simply disappeared like water being absorbed by a sponge. "What the hell?" Tommy gasped. Kane's voice remained calm. "Adaptive armor plating. It absorbs energy and converts it to power for our own weapons. The more they shoot at us, the stronger we become." Sarah's tactical officer, Lieutenant Park, was staring at her instruments in disbelief. "Captain, I'm reading massive energy buildups in the human fleet. It's like they're storing all that incoming fire." On the view screen, the Krex ships fired again. More powerful this time. Concentrated beams that could melt through solid rock. The weapons struck the human fleet in brilliant flashes of light. Again, nothing happened to Kane's ships. But now Sarah could see something new. Blue energy was flowing along the hulls of the mysterious vessels, growing brighter with each attack. "They're charging up," Rodriguez realized. "Those ships are using the enemy fire as fuel." Kane's hologram nodded approvingly. "Your commander is smart, Captain Chen. Yes, we're charging up. The Krex Empire is about to power their own destruction." The lead Krex dreadnought fired its main cannon. The beam was massive, wider than Sarah's entire ship. It struck one of Kane's vessels directly. For a moment, the human ship was completely hidden by the energy blast. Sarah was sure it had been destroyed. Then the light faded. The ship was still there, completely undamaged. But now it was glowing with stored energy, blue lightning crackling across its surface. "Impossible," came a voice over the communication channel. It was speaking the Krex language, but Arya translated it automatically. "No species has technology like this." Kane responded in perfect Krex. "You're right. No species does. But we're not just any species. We're human." Sarah felt a chill. How long had Kane's people been preparing for this? What else had they developed in secret? The Krex commander's voice came through again, filled with anger. "Humans are weak. We have studied your exploration fleets. You avoid combat. You make peace treaties." Kane laughed. "Those aren't warriors, Krex. Those are our diplomats and scientists. You've never met our military. Lies. We have conquered species far stronger than humans." "Have you?" Kane asked. "Let me ask you something, Krex commander. In all your conquests, how many times have you faced an enemy that let you shoot first?" Silence from the Krex fleet. Kane continued. "How many times have you faced an enemy that turned your own weapons against you?" How many times have you attacked someone who was holding back their true power? On Sarah's tactical display, she could see the human fleet spreading out. They moved with perfect coordination like a school of fish or a flock of birds. No wasted motion. No confusion. "Captain," Tommy said, his voice shaking, "I'm reading something strange from the human ships. It's like they're connected somehow." Kane heard him. "Quantum-linked neural networks, son. Every ship in our fleet shares information instantly. We think as one mind, fight as one body." The Krex fired again, but this time something different happened. Instead of just absorbing the energy, the human ships began to glow brighter. "Much brighter. Charge complete," Kane announced. "Beginning phase 2 of the operation." Sarah expected to see massive weapons emerge from the human ships. Cannons or missile tubes or energy projectors. Instead, something much simpler happened. Each ship fired a single, thin beam of light. The beams looked almost harmless compared to the massive Krex weapons. They were narrow, precise, and moved faster than Sarah's eyes could follow, but when they hit, the first Krex cruiser simply vanished. Not exploded, not damaged, vanished, like it had never existed. Then another, and another. "Molecular disintegration beams," Kane explained casually. "We take all that energy you gave us and focus it into quantum-level precision. We don't blow up your ships. We convince their atoms to stop being ships." Sarah watched in stunned silence as the Krex fleet died. Not ship by ship, but dozens at once. The human weapons fired in perfect sequence, each beam finding its target with impossible accuracy. The Krex dreadnoughts tried to retreat, but they were too slow. The human ships moved like ghosts, appearing wherever they needed to be. "This is impossible," the Krex commander screamed. "You cannot have developed such technology so quickly." Kane's response was quiet, almost sad. "Quickly? We've been preparing for this day for generations. Ever since the first human colony ship left Earth, we knew someone would eventually threaten our people. You lie. Your species is young." "Weak, young," Kane asked. "Do you know how old humanity really is, Krex? Do you know how long we've been watching the galaxy, learning about every species, every weapon, every weakness?" More Krex ships vanished under the precise fire of the human fleet. Kane continued. "We sent out exploration fleets not just to find new homes, but to study potential threats. Every species you've conquered, we've learned about. Every weapon you've used, we've found a counter for." Sarah realized the truth was even more terrifying than she'd thought. Kane's people hadn't just been preparing for war. They'd been preparing for this specific war against this specific enemy. "The Krex Empire has existed for 10,000 years, Kane said. "We've been studying you for most of that time. We know how you fight, how you think, how you break. Only a few Krex ships remained now. The 3 dreadnoughts and a handful of smaller vessels. They were trying to flee, but the human ships surrounded them effortlessly." "Wait," Sarah called out. "Admiral Kane, they're trying to surrender." She was right. The Krex ships had stopped firing and were broadcasting surrender signals. Kane's hologram turned to look at her. For a moment, his expression softened. "Captain Chen, how many colonists did the Krex kill before we arrived?" Sarah checked the reports coming from Zeta Colony. Her face went pale. "Preliminary scans show 15,000 casualties." Kane nodded. 15,000 human beings. Farmers, scientists, teachers, children. They died because the Krex Empire thought humans were weak. The remaining Krex ships continued broadcasting surrender signals. Kane's expression hardened. "But humans are not weak, Captain. We're just very, very patient. The human fleet's weapons charged up one final time." "Admiral, wait," Sarah pleaded. "If they surrender..." Kane looked at her with something like pity. "Captain, you're still thinking like an explorer. I'm thinking like a protector." The last of the Krex ships vanished in flashes of light. The space around Zeta Colony was empty except for the human fleet and Sarah's ship. "The immediate threat is eliminated," Kane announced. "But this is just the beginning." Sarah felt ice in her veins. "Beginning of what?" Kane's smile was cold and terrible. "The Krex Empire is about to learn what happens when you threaten human civilians. We're going to pay them a visit." The message, the rescue of Zeta Colony, took only hours. Sarah watched in amazement as Kane's fleet deployed technology she couldn't even understand. Medical ships that could heal wounds with beams of light. Construction vessels that rebuilt, destroyed buildings in minutes. Transport ships that evacuated the injured faster than should have been possible. But it was the conversation with the survivors that changed everything. "They came without warning," said Dr. Martinez, the colony's lead scientist. He was bandaged and exhausted, but alive. The Krex fleet just appeared and started bombing civilian areas. No demands, no communication, just slaughter. Sarah felt sick. "How many survivors?" 35,000 out of 50,000, Dr. Martinez replied, his voice breaking. "They targeted the schools first, then the hospitals." Kane's hologram materialized beside them. "Doctor, did the Krex say anything? Any message or explanation?" Dr. Martinez nodded. "Their commander made an announcement. He said this was a demonstration, that any human colony that didn't surrender immediately would suffer the same fate." Sarah's blood ran cold. There were dozens of human colonies scattered across the galaxy. Millions of people. "How many colonies know about the attack?" Kane asked. "We sent warnings to everyone," Dr. Martinez said. "But most colonies don't have military defenses. They're just families trying to build new lives." Kane was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was different. Colder. "Doctor, you've done good work here. Your people are safe now. Captain Chen will help coordinate the evacuation of anyone who wants to leave." "What about you?" Sarah asked. "What is your fleet going to do?" Kane's hologram smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "We're going to deliver a message." Before Sarah could ask what he meant, alarms started ringing throughout her ship. Tommy was frantically working at his communications console. "Captain, I'm receiving signals from across the galaxy. Other human colonies are under attack." The main view screen filled with desperate transmissions. "New Geneva colony to anyone listening. Krex ships are bombing our cities. This is Peaceful Valley settlement. They're killing everyone. Please help. Terra Nova colony. We have children here. The Krex are slaughtering them." Dozens of voices, all pleading for help. All being murdered while Sarah listened. Kane's expression didn't change. If anything, he looked satisfied. "This is what we expected," he said calmly. "The Krex Empire believes in total war. They think that if they kill enough civilians quickly, humanity will surrender." Sarah stared at him. "How can you be so calm? Those are human beings dying." "Yes," Kane agreed, "and their deaths will not be meaningless." More signals came through. "Harvest Moon colony. The Krex are using poison gas on our farms." "This is Liberty Station. They're targeting the nurseries where we keep the children." "Eden colony. They're bombing the refugee camps. These people were just trying to escape war." Sarah felt tears on her face. The scale of the slaughter was beyond anything she could imagine. But Kane remained cold and focused. "Aria, patch me through to all human colonies, all exploration fleets, all civilian ships. Galaxy-wide transmission." "Yes, Admiral," the AI responded. "Channel open." Kane's hologram expanded, becoming visible to millions of humans across space. "This is Admiral Marcus Kane of the Human Defense Fleet. By now you've heard about the attacks on our colonies. 15 worlds have been hit. Hundreds of thousands of our people are dead." Sarah watched the numbers climbing on her screen. The casualty reports were getting worse. Kane continued. "The Krex Empire believes they can terrorize humanity into submission. They think we will surrender rather than watch our families die." His voice grew harder. "They are wrong. To all human colonies, begin emergency evacuations immediately. Take only what you need. Defense fleet vessels are moving to assist. To all exploration ships, return to your home bases. Civilian vessels should not engage Krex forces. To the Krex Empire, you have made a grave mistake." Kane paused, and the silence was terrible. "For generations, you have conquered weaker species through terror and overwhelming force. You attack civilians to break the spirit of your enemies. This strategy has worked for 10,000 years. But you have never fought humans before." On Sarah's screen, she could see Kane's fleet moving, but not toward the colonies under attack, toward something else. Humanity does not surrender when threatened. We adapt, we evolve, we become something new. The fleet was heading for a massive space station that Sarah hadn't noticed before. It was larger than a small moon, covered in weapons and sensors. Kane's transmission continued across the galaxy. You want to see what humans do when you threaten our families? You want to know what happens when you murder our children? The space station powered up. Energy readings that made Sarah's instruments scream in protest. You're about to find out. Kane's hologram turned to face Sarah directly. Captain Chen, you and your crew are about to witness something that no one in the galaxy has seen before. What is that thing? Sarah whispered, staring at the massive station. That, Kane said proudly, is the hammer of humanity. We've been building it for 30 years. It's designed for one purpose, to show aggressive species what happens when they threaten human civilians. The station was pointing toward a distant star system. Sarah's tactical officer gasped when she realized which system it was. That's the Krek's home system, Lieutenant Park said. Their capital world, Kane nodded. 18 billion Kreks live in that system. Their government, their military command, their culture, everything that makes the Krek's empire possible. Sarah felt her heart stop. You can't be planning to kill 18 billion beings, Kane finished. No, Captain. That would make us monsters. Sarah felt relief flood through her. Then Kane smiled. We're going to do something much more effective. The hammer of humanity fired, but instead of a weapon, it launched something else. Millions of small objects, each one no bigger than Sarah's fist. Nanobots, Kane explained. Self-replicating, intelligent, completely harmless to living beings. What do they do? Sarah asked. Kane's smile grew wider. They eat technology. On the view screen, Sarah could see the nanobots spreading across space, heading for the Krek's home system at incredible speed. In approximately 6 hours, every piece of Krek's technology in their capital system will cease to function. Ships, weapons, communication systems, life support, transportation, everything. Sarah's mind reeled. But that will leave them helpless. Exactly, Kane said. No ships to attack our colonies. No weapons to threaten our people. No way to coordinate their military. But they'll be trapped on their planet. Kane nodded. Until they learn to behave. Across the galaxy, the attacks on human colonies suddenly stopped. Sarah could see on her instruments that the Krek ships were receiving urgent recall orders. Kane's transmission continued to broadcast to every human in space. The immediate threat to our colonies has ended. The Krek's empire is now dealing with an internal crisis. Evacuation should continue, but the bombing has stopped. Sarah watched the tactical display as Krek's fleets across the galaxy turned around and raced back toward their home system. But they wouldn't arrive in time to stop the nanobots. Admiral, she said quietly, what happens after the nanobots shut down their technology? Kane's expression became thoughtful. That depends on the Kreks. They can learn to coexist peacefully with other species. They can develop new technology that doesn't threaten civilians. They can become better than they were. And if they don't, Kane's smile vanished. Then Phase 2 begins. Sarah didn't want to ask what Phase 2 was. She was beginning to understand that humanity had changed while she was exploring the galaxy. They had become something more dangerous than she could imagine. But she also realized something else. For the first time in galactic history, a species had found a way to stop a genocidal empire without becoming genocidal themselves. The Krek's empire had ruled through fear for 10,000 years. But humans had found something more powerful than fear. They had found patience. The empire falls 3 days after the nanobots reached the Krek's home system. Sarah received the most shocking transmission of her life. It came from the Krek's emperor himself. This is Emperor Vask of the Krek's empire, speaking to Admiral Kane of the human forces. The alien's voice was different from any Krek's communication Sarah had heard before. No arrogance, no threats, just exhaustion. Kane's hologram appeared on Sarah's bridge to receive the transmission. I am listening, Emperor, Kane replied calmly. Our capital system is dead, Vask continued. Your nanobots have consumed every piece of technology we possessed. Ships cannot fly, weapons cannot fire. Our people cannot even power their homes. Sarah watched Kane's face. He showed no emotion at all. But they are alive, Kane pointed out. All 18 billion of them. Unlike the humans you murdered on 15 colonies. Yes, the Emperor admitted. They are alive, as are the other 47 billion Krek citizens in our outer systems who are now completely cut off from our government. Sarah's tactical officer looked up from his console. Captain, I'm reading massive social breakdown in Krek space. Their entire empire is fragmenting. Kane nodded as if he'd expected this. When you build a civilization on conquest and terror, it only holds together as long as you can project power. Take away the power, and the empire collapses. Sarah finished. Emperor Vask's transmission continued. Admiral Kane, I'm prepared to discuss terms. I'm listening. Full withdrawal from all human space. Reparations for the families of those killed. A formal apology to the human species. Kane was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was careful. And what? Emperor, you've ruled through terror for 10,000 years. You've genocided hundreds of species. You've enslaved entire worlds. Do you really think an apology to humans is enough? The silence from the Krek's capital was long and uncomfortable. Finally, Emperor Vask spoke again. What? What do you want? Kane's response sent chills through Sarah's crew. I want you to understand what you've become. I want you to face every species you've wronged. I want your empire to crumble so badly that it can never threaten innocence again. Our empire is already crumbling. Without our capital system, we cannot maintain control over our territories. Good, Kane said simply. Sarah realized with growing horror that this had all been planned. The nanobots hadn't just been a defensive measure. They were designed to cause the complete collapse of Krek civilization. Admiral, she said quietly, how long will the nanobots continue consuming their technology? Kane looked at her with those cold, calculating eyes. Until we tell them to stop. And when will that be? Kane's smile was thin. When the Krek's empire learns to become something better. Over the next few hours, reports flooded in from across the galaxy. The collapse of Krek's central authority had triggered massive changes. Worlds that had been enslaved for centuries declared independence. Species that had been driven to near extinction began reclaiming their homelands. The Krek's military, unable to communicate or coordinate, fractured into thousands of small groups. But not all the news was good. Captain, Tommy reported, I'm receiving distress calls from former Krek slave worlds. Some of them are. They're taking revenge. Sarah's heart sank. She could guess what that meant. The view screen showed a transmission from a world called Thyros. The speaker was a tall, thin alien with scarred skin and burning eyes. This is Liberation Commander Zek of the Free Thyros Republic. We have captured 17 Krek's military bases. The war criminals who tortured our people for 800 years are now in our custody. Kane listened without comment. Commander Zek continued. We request permission from the Human Defense Fleet to proceed with justice executions. Sarah expected Kane to say no. The man who had used nanobots instead of genocide surely wouldn't approve of mass revenge killings. Instead, Kane said, That is not our decision, Commander Zek. You are free people now. Justice is your responsibility. Sarah stared at him in shock. Admiral, you can't be serious. Kane's hologram turned to her. Captain, the Krek's empire enslaved the Thyros people for 8 centuries. They tortured them, experimented on them, used them as disposable labor. Should I tell the survivors that they cannot seek justice? But mass executions are what the Kreks did to dozens of species, Kane interrupted. The difference is that the Thyros are executing war criminals, not innocent civilians. Similar transmissions came from across former Krek's space. Species after species reporting the capture and execution of their former oppressors. The collapse of the Krek's empire had unleashed decades of stored rage and hunger for vengeance. Sarah watched the galaxy tear itself apart and realized that Kane's plan was even more complex than she'd thought. He hadn't just defeated the Krek's empire. He had created the conditions for its victims to destroy it completely. How many Kreks do you think will survive this? She asked. Kane considered the question seriously. Probably most of them. The civilian populations on Krek's core worlds aren't war criminals. They're just ordinary people who were born into an evil system. But their military, their government, Kane's expression hardened. War criminals deserve justice, Captain. The Krek's military spent 10,000 years committing genocide. Their government ordered the extermination of entire species. They chose their fate when they decided to murder children to break their enemy's will. As if summoned by their conversation, Emperor Vask's transmission came through again. "Admiral Kane, please. You must stop this. My people are being slaughtered across the galaxy." Kane's response was ice cold. "Your people? Emperor, when you ordered the bombing of human nurseries, did you think about the children inside? That was different. It was military strategy." "No," Kane said firmly. "It was murder. And now your victims are free to seek justice. Please, I will give you anything. Technology, resources, information about other threats to humanity." Kane was quiet for a moment. Sarah thought he might be reconsidering. Then Kane spoke, and his words changed the galaxy forever. "Emperor Vask, I want you to listen very carefully. For 10,000 years, the Krex Empire has existed by making other species afraid. You conquered through terror. You ruled through cruelty. You expanded by committing genocide." The transmission from the Krex capital was filled with sounds of chaos and panic. Kane continued, "But humans don't rule through fear, Emperor. We protect through preparation. We defend through overwhelming response. We ensure peace through the complete elimination of threats. We surrender, completely and unconditionally." "Too late," Kane said simply. "You surrendered after murdering hundreds of thousands of human civilians. You surrendered after your empire began to collapse. You surrendered when you had no other choice. What do you want from us?" Kane's final words to the Krex Emperor were quiet but absolute. "I want your empire to die. I want your victims to be free. I want the galaxy to know that any species that threatens human civilians will face consequences beyond their imagination." The transmission ended. Sarah looked around her bridge. Her crew was staring at Kane's hologram with expressions of shock, fear, and something that might have been awe. "Admiral," she said carefully, "what happens now?" Kane's smile returned. "But it was different now. Satisfied. Now, Captain, we watch the galaxy become a better place." Sarah realized that she was witnessing the end of one age and the beginning of another. The age of conquest and empire was ending. What came next would be shaped by humanity's response to the Krex threat, and that response had been more terrible and more effective than anyone could have imagined. The new Galaxion year later, Sarah stood on the bridge of her ship, looking out at something that had never existed before in galactic history. The Galactic Peace Conference. Thousands of ships from hundreds of species filled the space around Harmony Station, the massive neutral facility that had been built in just 6 months. Every major civilization was represented. Many were species that Sarah had never seen before. Worlds that had hidden from the Krex Empire for centuries were finally emerging. But the most remarkable sight was the group of small, damaged ships in one section of the gathering. They were Krex vessels. "Captain," Tommy reported, "we're receiving a transmission from the Krex delegation." Sarah nodded. "Put it through." The figure that appeared on screen was barely recognizable as the same species that had terrorized the galaxy for 10,000 years. This Krex was thin, scarred, and wore simple clothes instead of military armor. "This is former General Krev of the Krex Remnant Coalition. We request permission to address the conference." Sarah looked to Kane's hologram. The Admiral had become something of a permanent fixture on her bridge over the past year. "What do you think, Admiral?" Kane studied the Krex representative for a long moment. "Let him speak." The conference hall was massive, with delegates from every corner of the galaxy. When the Krex representative took the speaking platform, the silence was deafening. Former General Krev spoke slowly, carefully. "Delegates of the galaxy, I stand before you as a representative of what remains of the Krex people, not the Krex Empire. That evil institution is dead. I speak for the survivors who are trying to build something better." Angry murmurs rose from the assembled delegates. Many species had suffered under Krex rule for centuries. Krev continued, "We do not ask for forgiveness. What our empire did was unforgivable. We do not ask for your trust. We have not earned it. We ask only for the chance to prove that we can change." The Thyros delegation leader, the same Commander Zek who had led the revenge killings, stood up. "You speak of change. Krex, But your species spent 10,000 years perfecting the art of genocide. Why should we believe you are capable of anything else? Krev's response surprised everyone. Because we have learned what it means to be victims. He gestured to a holographic display that showed the current state of former Krek space. Our empire is gone. Our military is destroyed. Our worlds are ruled by the people we once enslaved. Those of us who survived do so only because our former victims chose mercy over justice. Sarah saw Commander Zek shift uncomfortably. The liberation of Krek space had not been as simple as revenge. Many species had indeed chosen to spare Krek civilians, even after centuries of oppression. Krev continued, "We have learned what it means to be powerless, to fear for our children's safety, to watch our culture die, to beg for help from those we once considered inferior. And what have you learned from this?" asked a delegate from the peaceful Vegan Confederation. "We have learned that strength is not the ability to destroy others. True strength is the ability to protect those who cannot protect themselves." Kane's hologram stepped forward. Throughout the past year, he had become something of a galactic figure, the human who had ended the age of empires without becoming an emperor himself. Former General Krev, what does the Krek's Remnant Coalition propose to contribute to galactic peace? Krev straightened, and for the first time, Sarah saw something in his posture that reminded her of the old Krek's pride. But different, humbled. "We propose to become the galaxy's memory," Krev said. "We will document every crime our empire committed, every genocide, every act of cruelty, every species we drove to extinction. We will teach our children and grandchildren exactly what we were so they can never become it again." The hall was silent. Krev continued, "We will also share every piece of military technology we developed. Not to build new weapons, but to help other species defend themselves from future threats. We know how empires think because we were one." Kane nodded slowly. "And if another species tries to build an empire like yours, then we will be the first to stand against them," Krev replied without hesitation. "We know the signs. We know how it begins. We know how to stop it." Commander Zek stood again. "You expect us to trust you as guardians against tyranny? You who were the greatest tyrants in galactic history?" Krev's response was quiet but firm. "No, Commander. We expect you to watch us, every day for the rest of our existence. We expect you to judge us by our actions, not our words. And if we ever begin to slide back toward what we were, we expect you to stop us." Sarah felt a chill. The former Krek's general wasn't just offering cooperation. He was offering to put his entire species under permanent supervision. A new voice joined the conversation. It was Dr. Martinez from Zeta Colony, speaking for the human civilian population. "The Kreks murdered 15,000 of my people," he said. "I watched children die in the bombing. I held families as they bled out in the ruins of their homes." The hall held its breath. Dr. Martinez continued, "But I also watched the survivors of Krek's oppression choose mercy over revenge. I saw species that could have exterminated their former oppressors instead choose to build something better." He looked directly at Krev. "If they can find forgiveness, then perhaps we can find a way forward." Kane stepped to the center of the hall. "The purpose of this conference is not to relitigate the past. It's to build a future where no species can do what the Krek's empire did." A holographic display showed his proposal, something that had never existed in galactic history. "The Galactic Defense Accord," Kane announced. "Every species contributes to a shared defensive network. No single civilization becomes powerful enough to threaten the others. No empire can rise to dominate the galaxy." The display showed the structure, shared technology, joint training, mutual defense agreements, and most importantly, a monitoring system that would detect any species beginning to build imperial ambitions. "And who leads this accord?" asked a delegate from the Crystal Spheres Alliance. Kane's answer surprised everyone. "No one." "Explain." "Humans will not lead this alliance," Kane said firmly. "We've seen what happens when one species becomes too powerful. Instead, leadership rotates between species every 5 years. Decisions require majority approval. No single civilization can dominate." Sarah realized this was the most important moment in galactic history. Kane was voluntarily giving up the power that humanity had just demonstrated. Commander Zek spoke up. Admiral Kane, your fleet defeated the Krex Empire in hours. Your technology is centuries ahead of ours. Why would you give up that advantage? Kane's smile was the first truly warm expression Sarah had seen from him. Because, Commander, the goal was never to rule the galaxy. The goal was to protect our people and create a universe where children can grow up safely. He gestured to the assembled delegates. Look around this room. A year ago, half these species were hiding from the Krex Empire. The other half were either slaves or victims. Now you're all here free building something together. But what happens when the next threat emerges? Asked a delegate. What happens when some species discovers weapons that could threaten everyone? Kane's expression became serious. Then we face it together, all of us. That's what the Accord means. No species stands alone against galactic threats. The voting took 3 days. In the end, 847 species joined the Galactic Defense Accord. Only 12 refused, and they were mostly isolated civilizations that preferred complete independence. Even more surprising, 23 Krex remnant groups signed the accord, accepting permanent monitoring and contributing their military knowledge to the common defense. As the conference ended, Sarah found herself alone on the observation deck with Kane's hologram. Admiral, she said, I have to ask, was this all planned from the beginning? Kane was quiet for a long moment. Which part? All of it. The nanobots, the collapse of the Krex Empire, the liberation of their victims, this conference. Was it all part of some grand strategy? Kane's hologram flickered, and for a moment Sarah thought she saw something human in his eyes. Uncertainty, maybe even regret. Captain, when we first detected the Krex Empire centuries ago, we had a choice. We could hide, like so many species did. We could try to negotiate, knowing they would eventually betray any agreement. Or we could prepare for the day when they threatened human civilians. So you chose preparation. We chose to become something that could protect not just humans, but everyone the Krex threatened. We studied every empire that had ever existed, every mistake they made, every way they fell. Sarah waited for him to continue. But if you're asking whether I planned for the galaxy to come together like this, no, I hoped. But I didn't dare plan for it. What did you plan for? Kane's smile was sad. I planned for humanity to become the next empire. I planned for us to rule through fear, just more efficiently than the Krex. I planned for us to become what we fought against. Sarah felt a chill. What changed? You did. Sarah blinked. Me? You and your crew, Captain. When you saw the Krex attacking civilians, you didn't hesitate to help even though your ship was outgunned. When you saw the scale of the genocide, you wept for people you'd never met. When the Empire fell and species began taking revenge, you asked me to show mercy. Kane's hologram looked out at the departing ships of the conference delegates. I spent 50 years preparing to become a monster to fight monsters. But you reminded me that the goal was never to win. It was to remain human while winning. So what happens now? Sarah asked. What happens to your fleet? To the weapons that could destroy civilizations? Kane was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried a weight Sarah had never heard before. The human defense fleet will continue to exist, Captain. We'll continue to watch for threats and protect civilians. But we'll never again make decisions alone. We'll be part of something larger. The Galactic Defense Accord. Yes, and maybe in time, we can become the species we were meant to be instead of the weapon we made ourselves into. Sarah looked out at the ships departing for their home worlds. Humans, Krex, Thyros, and hundreds of other species, all heading home to build a new kind of galaxy. Admiral, do you think it will work? Can species that have been enemies for millennia really learn to cooperate? Kane's final words stayed with Sarah for the rest of her life. Captain, a year ago, the Krex Empire ruled through terror and genocide. Today, former Krex generals are working with their former victims to build a peaceful galaxy. If that's possible, then anything is possible. The hologram faded, leaving Sarah alone with her thoughts and the sight of a galaxy learning to live without empires. 6 months later, Sarah received a transmission that made her smile. It was from Dr. Martinez on Zeta Colony, which had been completely rebuilt. Captain Chen, I wanted you to know, we just graduated our first class from the new Galactic Peace Academy. 50 students from 23 different species, including 3 young Kreks who want to become diplomats. They're learning to solve problems with words instead of weapons. They're learning that different species can be stronger together than apart. One of the human students asked me what the most important lesson of the Kreks War was. I told her it wasn't about how humans could destroy their enemies. It was about how humans chose not to become their enemies. Sarah looked out at the stars and realized that for the first time in galactic history, parents could look up at the night sky and know their children would inherit a universe where no empire could threaten them. The age of conquest was over. The age of cooperation had begun. And it had all started with a simple human principle: protect the innocent, no matter the cost. The end. This story explores the theme of power and responsibility, showing how humanity could achieve galactic dominance while choosing to use that power to create cooperation rather than empire. The 5 parts build suspense while exploring moral questions about justice, mercy, and what it means to win without becoming the monster you fought against.